First Sunday of February always gives us a chance to reflect on Black History Month, which honors contributions of Black Canadians historically and in the present day. This year especially, Black History Month celebrates resilience, innovation, and determination, two amazingly strong and beautiful values: resilience, innovation, determination, to work towards a more equitable, inclusive, and diverse Canada. Goals I know we all believe in, a goal in which everybody has the opportunity to flourish. This year's slogan is February and Forever, an important reminder this is not just one month of the year. I have a couple of little things that you might be interested in knowing about. Coming up on the 9th, just a few days now, there is impact on the Black community of COVID-19. It's a Zoom meeting, and it's with Help Aid and Black community leaders, just to find out the impact in particular of COVID-19 on the Black community in Canada. And that's at Help Aid. If you phone them or go to their website, you can find out ways to reserve a spot and be part of that conversation. Another thing to note is that this year the Government of Canada is profiling 8 notable Black Canadians on its website, Canadians who have helped shape the Canada that we have in 2022 and who've made and continue to make contributions. And one of them is our own Victorian councillor, Dubau, who is a native of Somalia. Sharmiki Dubau left his homeland of Somalia when he was only 8 because of the Civil War, and for 2 decades sought refuge in different parts of Africa until Canada offered him a safe haven in 2012. The very year after becoming a Canadian, he voted in his first election, and then he ran. And he was elected a councillor in Victoria, the first Black councillor in Victoria for 152 years. We congratulate him on this recognition and salute his involvement in many community actions, helping us become a more diverse and equitable city. And we can also affirm the government's choice of notable Canadians, including him. So we segue from those resilient and innovative and determined values to this notion of God is holding your life. And it's a strong and easy segue, isn't it? It's a strong bridge for us to walk over. How do we live so that our spirituality grows stronger and be a more resilient, innovative, and dependable part of our lives as we go into the rest of 2022? We've been looking this year, because of losses on the international stage, at people who were able to have their spirituality such a strong and powerful resource that, in spite of the conditions around them, men like Desmond Tutu were able to make God still and find hope in the vision, such as the vision of the psalmist and the Old Testament prophets, as the center of his life in spite of all the conditions around that ought to have discouraged him. Internationally as well, we remember Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist philosopher, priest, leader, speaker for justice and determination, resilience. We remembered these people who made spirituality a key part of their lives in spite of political turmoil around them. Oftentimes I think we feel like if things were more peaceful, we could be more spiritual. And yet in our own lifetime, we have had these extraordinary and notable examples of people who, in spite of the mayhem around them, made spirituality the center of their lives. The psalmist, we heard, talks about the things that could tempt us to put other gods in front of other sources of strength. We don't really need them to tell us that we live in a celebrity culture. We live where influencers are so important. We know how easy it is to put them ahead of any spiritual direction, taking any time for spiritual development, reading, or journaling. But here we have the sense of rest. Where do you imagine? I'm just wondering about this. Where do you find rest for your soul? I mean, I know about 8 hours sleep and drinking herbal tea is rest for your body, but this is a bigger question, isn't it, that the psalmist has written for us, where we find refuge, where we find rest spiritually in the midst of all that's going on, from the good of the opening of the Olympics in spite of being afraid that they wouldn't happen, to the confusion of what's going on in downtown Ottawa. Where do we find rest? Rest in spite of people around us yelling their opinions at us, people around us making millions of dollars and perhaps making us want to have our own millions, wars, violence. But the psalmist says, but if you're a monotheist, if you believe in one God, you can't hold all those things as really, really important and hope to have strength from your relationship with God. You have to be able to see God as your centerpiece. However you define God, however you imagine God or understand the Holy One, that has to be the center. Now, the psalmist is very, very radical and says all those other people are just like a breath, just nothing. That's a really hard thing for us to hold on to. We may not be as spiritually evolved as she was when she wrote the psalm, but we do know that we can't hold two things. You can't hate and love at the same time. So if we're choosing God, if we're choosing the Holy One, if we're choosing a spiritually based life, this is our invitation to think and pray about how we might do that. Whatever paths of spirituality are ours. This is the season of Epiphany. As David said, we're halfway through. The season that began, of course, with the 3 wise people traveling across a desert under the guidance of a star. But the point is not that they traveled, but that they sought and found. It was revealed to them, right? They found baby Jesus. And so we have these images of the globe around us to remind us of our own journeys. But of course, the journeys can be just within our hearts and within our spirits. But they do invite us, don't they, to consider what sources of refuge have you traveled to find? What sources of what places of rest have you found yourself walking across a desert, hoping to have something revealed? What are we leaning on? What is it that we're leaning on? The psalmist suggests money and power. There are other things, relationships, achievements, prestige. But some of them seem positive, don't they? The problem is when they become unable to bear the weight of what we are experiencing, and when we lean on them, the wall crumbles. That the things that won't ultimately support the weight of our lives in the 21st century. What will support is something that will provide our souls a place of rest. And I just wonder, if you're on the chat box, what would be a place where you would say your soul, your spirit, that inner part of you that you may not even name, feels relief, at ease? Is it a picture that comes to you? The screen at the beginning of the sermon had a baby sound asleep. Is that a picture that works for you? Is it a nature like these beautiful forsythia that are actually in bloom, or early tulips that are coming through the soil? Could it be something that you've experienced or read about or seen in a movie that when you did, you felt something deep inside you melt and feel a spiritual sense of awe? It might be the very opposite of that. It may be that you are exhausted and you've broken 3 nails because you've been working at a food bank and packing up boxes of things, and you look around at everybody else wearing dirty t-shirts and sweating and trying to get things done, and you think to yourself, this is right. This is right. That's a moment of your soul at rest. So it doesn't necessarily have to be quiet in nature. It can be in the hurly-burly of being an active mission actor. This Friday, we had for quite a while over my part of Victoria a huge, almost fluffy rainbow. It was an extraordinary thing. I hadn't seen one that big just like that before. I bet that the images we had before COVID are different than we are now. Because I believe that for many of us, as the Queen said in her message a couple of Christmases ago, our souls would be at rest if we could have a hug from someone. Not that they've passed on, but just that for different reasons because of COVID, we haven't been able to do that. To touch hands, to touch a stranger on the back of the shoulder to say, well done. But some of those images, before COVID, after COVID, during COVID, are the core ones for you. And they're probably the timeless ones. Oftentimes in scriptures, we hear about the eagle. And I know many of you will have had the same experience I have, and you've heard that noise, that an eagle in the air, and you've looked up and seen them way high, circling above you. And there's a feeling, isn't there, in your soul that this is right. It could be a song or the words of a prayer of blessing that somehow stuck with you, and although you only heard them once, when you say them again, they resonate at a very deep part of your soul. So the psalmist invites us, the sacred spirit invited the psalmist, in times of swirling emotions and big transitions, times where we need to quietly remember last week's psalm, that God is everywhere. And that's not physically everywhere. That's not alone what it means. It means that, but it means much more. It means that there's nowhere we can go emotionally, spiritually, that God is not there. There's nothing we've thought of that God cannot be with us in that thought. We are not destitute. God is always with us. And I think that does support our souls. Maybe the word rest doesn't work for you. Maybe there's another word, I wonder. Maybe supported? Maybe just feeling less unsteady? It may not be a great choral anthem. It might just be a hum. The different ways to pray, but feeling the warmth of your own hands over your heart. Maybe that's what it is. I can't prescribe for you, and I hope that you can describe for you, because each one of us wants and needs the gifts of perseverance that come from having a place where our soul can rest, and in that resting, be revived. May our actions help keep other people's souls aloft. Amen.